prior written notice on why you disagree. So then they would give you something that says, looking at the data, blah, 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 we feel increased speech services would not benefit, and then your granddaughter's name, okay?
Okay, thanks.
That's what that is. Now, the other stuff we're going to get to in a minute, and in fact, let's look. All right, I like this because appropriate is not necessarily the best. Of course, that's hard for us because I want the best. I want the best for my child, I want the best for every child. But appropriate is not the best. So we go to the IEP. So we've got this legal written document. So it is a document, but it's also a process. Remember, we're going to go through a year with this document. Who, what, where, when, why. All right? Now, you have annuals every year, but you can request an IEP meeting at any time. I have never had one meeting a year yet. I don't think I'm ever going to, so I don't, that's not one of my goals anyway, because I've been beneficial with the meetings. But you can request a meeting when needed. What do you need to do? Put it in writing. Thank you. All right. So this is what your next question was, and we're going to get to this. This is a bill. No, we're good. But I had to separate it because I didn't want to confuse you. Because it's funny. Have you noticed in our special education world that we are in that we do have a different vocabulary? And it's funny, and that's why I say to everybody, if I'm using words you don't understand, please raise your hand, yell out, say what? Because these words are second nature to us, but they weren't when I started. You know, when I was a science teacher, I didn't know a lot of any of this. Yes?
I guess I'm confused about what's the difference between meetings of what sounds like a similar team to talk about my niece's intervention plan and an official IEP meeting, and are they different?
Yes, they are. They are different. Okay, so when we look at students who have concerns, the school system does recommend students to school service team. It was on the slide a long time ago that talked about who can refer a child for an IEP. All right. Now, if a student is getting interventions, at no time is it not an option for a parent to request an IEP team meeting, okay? An IEP team meeting is going to have, no, I don't have it in this one. We need a slide of who's in the meeting.
We had, I think it was.
Was it?
But does your niece have a 504, an IFS?
Has an intervention plan, but all the people who are listed as being participants in an IEP meeting are at these meetings too.
How old is she?
She's in kindergarten.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know, what county?
Hartford County?
Okay, I don't know what an intervention plan is.
I do. It's a school service team.
So
I'm
it's
from
not,
Hartford County
okay.
too. So here's what happens. You have a school service team. So essentially what you need to do is you need to request an IEP meeting. And if they say, well, we're talking about this in school service team, it doesn't matter. As a parent, if you request an IEP team meeting, they have to have a meeting to discuss evaluation. So saying we're doing interventions, no.
But you know what this is? This is RTI.
Yes.
They threw in this little wrinkle a couple of years ago called response to intervention, which is sort of a pre-intervention strategy where you are supposed to identify kids you suspect may have a disability and you do some non-special ed interventions. So sort of it's like a pre-special ed kind of intervention. However, if they've been doing this all year, then you do need to ask for an IEP meeting because you can't use response to intervention time as a way of delaying referring to special education. So you can do it both at the same time. You could be doing these RTI things in the classroom while the process of identifying a student as possibly needing special education is occurring. But they can't say, well, we're going to do RTI for 6 months and then, you know, we're going to regroup. So
and then rediscuss. So that's why you want to put your request in writing. Now, with looking at the RTI, There's also something called Universal Design for Instruction. And pretty much, and that, if you wanted to look at that, that's at the CAST website, CAST. And Universal Design for Instruction really talks about good teaching and using multi-modalities of instruction. And when my darling, Alex, was in kindergarten, I like to call her a duck, because she followed that kindergarten teacher. The teacher would come and give her an instruction to everybody. You know, the kindergarten's really nice, they're in the little tables. Everybody picked up their crayons, everybody started the work except Alex. She went and followed the teacher all around the room. Now, Alexandria also is smart. She's not a genius like Andrew, but she's smart. So then the teacher, I said to the teacher, you know, I have concerns about Alex. And we were talking about it, and she said, well, you know, my fear, Alex is in 6th grade. My fear is if we refer her now in kindergarten, we can't refer her again for 3 years. And, okay, at this point, I'm working in Harford County, for Harford County Public Schools, helping parents with advocacy skills. And I loved this kindergarten, and I said, okay, yeah, right. And then I left, and I said, wait a minute. We can refer Alex again next year. What happened? The teacher had gotten incorrect information. Remember I told you that you have to talk about 3 years assessing? Someone had told her if you refer a child, you can't test them again for 3 years. And she was worried that if Alex wasn't found eligible, we couldn't look for 3 years. So once I figured it out, we sat down and talked, and I said, oh, no, let me explain. And I gave her the documents to show her, and then we referred, and then Alex was eligible. And right now, Alex has a 504. But do you see what I mean? Like, Alex had already gone to the school service team, but it wasn't enough. So that's where they're going to be doing. It's not specially designed instruction. It's not IEP, okay?
Now, everyone who has a kid currently receiving services, have you been getting information from your school at least 5 days before the IEP team meeting? Is anybody not getting it?
I'm meeting business days, that's...
Yeah.
You're so
We're
funny.
laughing. This is relatively new, and this is Maryland specific.
Yeah.
So if you move to another state, you're not necessarily going to get the information. This was a very big issue because justifiably parents were unhappy that they would show up at the IEP team meetings and the psychologist would basically be signing the report 2 minutes before you walked in the door, and so the families did not have an opportunity to review the information and think about it ahead of time. So 2 years ago, Maryland law requires now that at least 5 business days before the IEP team meeting, you have to somehow be given the information. It can be faxed to you, it can be emailed, you can pick it up at school, they can snail mail it, however it works for you. We're laughing because there was a bill introduced in this session that for some odd reason that no one still quite understands, there was a move to change this from 5 business days to 5 calendar days. I know that doesn't make any sense, but it actually would then give the teams more days in order to get the information out to you. And never ever question the power that parents of children with disabilities have. As individuals and as groups, you do have a voice, and a group in Montgomery County called McNeeds, which is Montgomery County Needs. It's a special ed parent advocacy entity, but I would encourage all of you to sign on because it has very good information.
They really
The
do.
McNeeds listserv got wind of this, and they went nuts. And email is wonderful, and the technology is wonderful because you can flood your delegates with emails about opposing. They started a petition. The poor delegate, Ann Kaiser, found herself in a very, very uncomfortable corner. She's tried to amend it a couple times and kind of wiggle out of it. It's not working too well. But basically, we're back to the 5 days, the 5 business days. That's gone away. We've agreed to expand our technical assistance bulletin, so we're going to give greater understanding to what is meant by an extenuating circumstance. I mean, there are reasons, if there's a hurricane and schools are closed, they're not going to be able to get you the information necessary. So that would be an act of God or an extenuating circumstance. But essentially, we're sort of back to where we were, just making it a little clearer what the requirements are. But this was a big issue this year. So really, you do have a lot of power as individuals and as groups, and you really should know your state elected officials.
Yes.
On the other hand, special education, the teachers and professionals, they are overloaded with this type of work to give the report. And the system becomes bureaucratic. And then the parents yelling next to that. If there is a way to make the system more sensitive to the need, less bureaucratic, not to accuse those psychologists who try to do the best to give you the reports. I mean, to go more deeply in the nature of the problem.
And I understand what you're saying.
Believe me, I feel sorry for all those professionals.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I think that the federal government says that this IEP team has parents as equal team members, and for us to be equal team members, we have to have time to look at that information, to digest what's being said, to understand so that we can participate. So I think that's where, I don't think it's more of the bureaucracy, I think it's more, this is set up to help parents really engage in the whole IEP team and the process. And you know, there's something, the next slide is about IEP amendments. And this is something that's beneficial too, because the parent and the teacher, or this parent and the related service provider can meet and amend the IEP without a full whole IEP team meeting, okay? So let's say we were talking about increasing some speech goals. We want to work on something, we want to add some things. The parent and that speech pathologist can meet and do this amendment, and then, you know, without the team, and then it becomes a part of that IEP. Okay, so that's something else too. Yes.
Two issues. The best IEP that I ever had was when I was tape recording the IEP. So the Board of Education was tape recording, and I was doing the same. It was wonderful, fantastic. Everything was alive, understanding. Marvelous, fantastic, no problem at all. The other issue that you have to think about is when the parent is, both parents or one parent at least, is in denial, very common in autism, believe me, or totally uneducated, or aggressive towards the school, you know, not understanding, because we have our needs, but we have to share resources with everyone.
Okay, we can talk afterwards. Let's move on, because we only have like 15 minutes.
Okay, sorry.
I thought we had to do 11:30.
9:30.
Is it 11 or 11:30?
After 11. Anybody able to stay after 11?
I apologize. I've been
Oh, I thought you were
myself
9:30
for
to
11:30.
11.
Okay, so when I was talking about, thank you, Marjorie. When I was talking about the goals, these are what is individualized. Okay, they are very individualized. They are going to be evaluated. You want data. You want to know how the data is being collected. Keep in mind the goals are for a 1-year period. All right, now, with IEP goals, we also have content standards. And here is where this is very beneficial for our students, because IEP goals need to be aligned. So, the state curriculum, that defines what students are to know. Here is the website. I strongly encourage all of you to go to this website. It'll have it in pre-K. For instance, it'll tell you how long a child should listen when they're in 2nd grade. Now, your goals are not the state curriculum, okay? It's not, but you need to know what is expected of all students. Right up here it says voluntary. It's not.
It's not.
This
It's
is not
involuntary.
voluntary, all right? This is the state curriculum. Okay, so we have student learning. We have improvement in teacher instruction. We, in Maryland, have high standards for all students. We've been #1 in the nation for 4 years in a row, for a reason. We have high standards. All right, this aligns IDEA and No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind talks about assessments and high expectations for all students. So, where do we start? Now, When we have an IEP document, the place we start is the present levels of functional, academic achievement and functional performance. These used to be called PLOPs, which was present levels of performance. It's not called a PLOP anymore. So what is this? This tells us what our child is able to do, okay? It also includes an impact statement. It's going to have the instructional needs, the strengths, the parent input, the results of evaluations. As parent input, some school systems send a little flyer, a little ditto type home to include it. I always write a lot of input. I think usually it's about 2 pages. It's really important that you share the parent input. So, what it is, it tells you what the child knows and what they're able to do, all right? This is really important because this is our starting point. So it's like a map. You can't, if you're in Towson Town Mall, you can't get to one of the stores unless you know where you are. This is where we're starting. All right, now, when we talk about special education and general education, really, when you think about it, we talked about, special education and what we want for our children, but when we look at it, what we want is we want to decrease the gap of general education and special education students. Okay, we want to decrease that gap. We want to get our special education students right there with their typically developing peers. Is that going to happen for every kid? No. But we want to decrease that gap. All right. I wrote in acceptable present levels just so you could see it to share with you. Yes?
The general education level, is that the maximum level that children with IEPs or 504s, is that the level that they try to get them to? Is that the ceiling?
Oh, no, there's no ceiling. When you look at, if we would look at the data for, let's say we look at MSAs, okay, in reading, 3rd grade, in Baltimore County. We would look at the data and we would see what score general education students received. Then they then pull out data and they'll see the score of special education students. So they want those special education student scores to go up, okay? Never do they ever not want everyone's to keep climbing. Does that answer?
But sort of a line in the sand would be what we expect a typical kid at 3rd grade to know. And so then we're measuring the students with disabilities in terms of how close are they getting to that 3rd grade. It doesn't mean that some 3rd graders aren't reading at a 4th or 5th grade level, but the bar is sort of, what do we expect a kid in 3rd grade to be able to do, and how does the disability affect the child's ability to get to that point?
Okay, I'm asking this question because if my daughter has speech language issues, and her level of achievement, IQ, whatever you want to call it, is above that level. So how do they say that it would impact her academic, I don't know what the word is for that, because she's already above that, but they're saying that it's not impacting because she's performing the same as the other normal kids. So I'm trying to understand how do they use that if it's individualized? Where is the benchmark for her, okay, as opposed to?
Is speech the only service? Is speech impairment the only issue?
Speech and language was the only one that she was.
Okay, can we talk afterwards? Because
because
speech and language is a little funky in that it's the one disability area where you can have a speech and language need, but it's not adversely affecting educational performance.
ADHD.
Okay, let's talk afterwards.
We'll talk afterwards and go, yes. So I gave you an impact statement just so that you can see a good example of an impact statement, and this will help understanding how it's written and how the disability does affect that specific student.
And this might be very helpful for you in terms of your issues, is to have an impact statement that humanizes your daughter, I guess, a bit more, takes her away from just a number, and talks about, you know, how the disability is impacting her and what her strengths are as well. So it looks at a bigger picture.
And every meeting, you're not gonna go over that number, but you are gonna go over this, you know, annually, and then as you work on that, okay? Now, this is just talking about in making sure that there are content standards. And the content standard is not the IEP goal, but is related. Now, another term that's thrown around is SMART goals. And this is kind of funny because originally I thought, oh my goodness, I need to learn how to write a SMART goal, and parents need to learn how to write SMART goals, and I kind of was like getting all into it a few years ago, and then I realized we really don't need to write a SMART goal, we need to know how to read a SMART goal. We need to know how to ask the question. So it really is specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, relevant, and time-sensitive. So here are some examples, you know, match the child's needs, some things for you to look at. And asking, you know, is this a SMART goal? How can we write SMART goals? And here's just a little checklist for SMART goals. So, talked about the goals. Now we have services. And this is an outline of the services. Is it classroom instruction? Is it speech and language? You know, where are they going to have the service? You know, what's going to be done? We also have related services. Related services can include, you know, OT, PT, counseling, health, assistive technology. All these things are related services, and they are also outlined in the IEP. Now, instructional and testing accommodations. So, when we talk about accommodations level the playing field, all right? Think of an accommodation like extra time, sitting in the front of the room, a ramp. These are things, they do not reduce the learning expectations. Here is a link to the Maryland Accommodations Manual. I strongly encourage you to look at this manual. It's a really good resource, and it really talks about accommodations that are used throughout Maryland. Now, I have found that the word accommodation and the word modification are used like they're the same, and they're not. So I'd like to just go really quickly over those definitions. So, an accommodation does not change the learning expectation. A modification does. So, if my daughter was going to have 10 spelling words a week instead of 20, that would be a program modification. The IEP team and I would discuss, is this in the best interest of my daughter? Now think about it. The other 10 words that every other child is getting, she's never going to get. So you have to look at, but is it going to benefit because of her self-esteem, because of her attention, because of her organization? Is this something that will benefit her? Okay? So that's where it's important to understand the difference between an accommodation and a modification. Now, modifications can increase the gap between general education and special education. So that's why it's really important to look at, right? We also have special considerations, and these are specific and appropriate to meet the needs of the student in the IEP. So AT and communication is required to be a part of the IEP discussion. So when the IEP team says, is assistive technology needed? It's important for you as part of the team to say, well, what are my options? I know a lot of times some people just say no, but that's not. You want to have an in-depth conversation. Let's think about it. My daughter needs to go shopping. How about something that she can put the price in and it'll tell her the change? What about, you know, certain types of calculators, pencils with grips? I laughed when I heard that that was assistive technology because you think of the big high money makers, but pencil grips are considered assistive technology. So these are things that you have to bring up and talk about as a part of the program. And you know, any accommodation that is being done in the classroom is to be done during assessments. So you want it done in instruction, you want it done in classroom assessments, and you want it done in state assessments. Supplementary aids and services. this outlines the support. So, you know, what's going to be different, how much staff is needed, the environmental supports, the social behavior supports. These are all important to make sure that we're having these discussions. Okay, in Maryland we have a wide continuum of learning in the least restrictive environment. And then the word maximum up there, this is the only time the word maximum is used in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it talks about where the child receives their education. So a child could receive their education in a general education classroom with the general education teacher providing the modifications and supports. Or the child could really receive it in a correctional facility, a home and hospital. I mean, it's a wide spectrum. Once again, it is based upon the needs of that child.
But keep in mind, nowhere in IDEA will you see the term inclusion or the term mainstreaming. Those words have been misused to imply something different than what the least restrictive environment means. The least restrictive environment does not mean that every kid with any disability goes to their home school and that's it. It is the least restrictive environment in which that child's IEP can be implemented. And so as Kim is saying, for some kids it's going to be a self-contained class, for some kids it's going to be a non-public special ed school, for some kids they're in residential programs at public expense because that's what they needed in order to have their IEPs implemented. So it depends, but you're not going to see inclusion, full inclusion, or mainstreaming anywhere in the law. That is not what the directive is.
Now, all students, including students with disabilities, have to take statewide assessments. So these are the statewide assessments that are out there. Now, students are to be working for a diploma. That's the goal for all students. Some of our students, maybe 1% of our students, have significant disabilities. And because of that,